Oh, I mustn't forget. If you find my mum, give her this music box. It plays one of Daddy's favourite songs, and when Daddy forgets us, we play it for him so he remembers. Mum's so silly running off without it. My mum wears a red jeweled brooch. It's so big and beautiful, you won't miss it.
Hello everyone, this is Aegon of Astora, and welcome back to Bloodborne Let's Talk Lore. This is episode 2. It is Thursday, July 16th today, on the day of recording, and I hope that each and every one of you out there are having a fantastic day today. And as you can see, we have a friend here, who we brought into our world using the beckoning bell. So let's have a look at that item description. Great old bell discovered in the underground labyrinth. Its ring resonates across worlds, and the first hunter used it as a special signal to call hunters from other worlds to cross the gap and cooperate. A human must use insight to ring this uncanny bell, but the benefits of cross-world cooperation are many. It's also worth noting that for Gascoigne to be here, he would have had to use the small resonant bell, the description for which reads, "Small bell discovered in the old underground labyrinth. Its ring resonates across worlds, and the first hunter used it as a special signal to call hunters from other worlds to cross the gap and cooperate. This bell resonates with its counterpart, the beckoning bell. Ring to help hunters in other worlds." So from these item descriptions we can learn a few things. The first is that it was discovered in the underground labyrinth, which we access via the Chalice rituals and the Chalice dungeons. The second is that it says the first hunter, presumably Gehrman, used it to call hunters from other worlds. But how exactly did this work before the hunter's dream was conceived? It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. If in fact there was some way of separating worlds before the hunter's dream was conceived and before, there existed countless Paleblood hunters, then the next question we have to ask is how many of these bells were discovered? I can't imagine that there was a resonant bell factory in the old underground labyrinth. There couldn't have been all that many. They must be rare, at least to some degree. Which leads us to ask, why does Father Gascoigne have a small resonant bell? And what is it that he stands to gain by ringing it and helping players in their own world? But yeah, I'd be very, very curious to hear what all you out there think about this, because I can't seem to make any sense of this. Why Gascoigne would have a small resonant bell. And I also wanted to point out that if you use the tiny music box in front of Cooperator Gascoigne, this happens. Shoutouts to Dira Duralvex, who posted about this on the Fextra Life Bloodborne wiki. And it's described in the wiki as a laugh, but it sounds more to me like a scoff. It's almost like he's saying, "Ha, you have one of those too?" But I don't know. Either way, I think that's a really cool little touch. And I'm sure I'm not the only person to have tried this, but I also tried to get Gascoigne to fight himself by trying to bring him down to his boss room. But unfortunately, he stops dead in his tracks as soon as you enter the room with the elevator in it. The only other alternative that I can think of, other than him having one of many small resonant bells that were churned out of the Thumerian resonant bell factory, is that he was at one point or another a Paleblood hunter. This is something we discussed in the previous episode, the idea of the Paleblood hunter, that is kind of the player character. And we established that there are two, plus the player character, that we know of. The first being Jura, the second being Eileen, and then the third being the player character. There doesn't seem to be any indication that Father Gascoigne was once a Paleblood hunter as well, except for the fact that he has a small resonant bell. I should also note that without really thinking, I also picked up the Sinister Resonant Bell from the Hunter's Dream, from the Insight Messengers, which meant that I had left myself with no insight with which to summon Father Gascoigne. So that's why you'll see a fog gate when we hit the Cleric Beast boss room, because I triggered the boss fight for the insight and then used the Bolt Hunter's Mark to get out of there. It's interesting to note that thanks to patch 1.05, you actually get insight back if you don't beckon any player characters, and that includes, for some reason or another, NPCs. Lotus Grammari writes that given how Jorah references the dream, and Eileen references both the dream and the doll, it's safe to say that they had the same deal as you. Seeing as they're still around but the hunt has not yet ended, plus their respective characters, Jorah having a crisis of conscience over killing beasts, Eileen focusing on hunting other hunters gone mad, I figured they failed to meet the goal of slaying Murgo and so were unceremoniously booted out of the dream. A few things I would say about this, the first being that it's not that the hunt has not yet ended, but that there are multiple hunts, that the hunt repeats itself over and over again, but that the details of the hunt may in fact change from one hunt to the next. So whereas in the context of the game, where we are at this very moment, the contract is to slay Murgo, it would seem that for past Paleblood hunters, the contract may have been different. But that's something we'll talk about a great deal in the next episode when we head to Old Yharnam. But beyond that, that raises an interesting point about what seems to be missing from Bloodborne, and that is an equivalent to the hollowing mechanic, which would help to explain the failure of player characters. Whereas currently there does not seem, at least as far as I can tell, there does not seem to be any mechanical explanation for players failing and quitting the game, such that there is in Dark Souls 1 and 2. But we will be talking about that a great deal going forward as well. For now, I figured it would be interesting to see if Father Gascoigne might be able to take on the Cleric Beast himself, a la Black Iron Tarkus. So let's see how that goes. Thank you kindly, Father Gascoigne. And so with the Cleric Beast defeated, we've picked up the Sword Hunter badge. Sword Hunter badge, one of the badges crafted by the Healing Church. The silver sword is a symbol of a church hunter. Ludwig was the first of many Healing Church hunters to come, many of whom were clerics. As it was, clerics transformed into the most hideous beasts. And so, as I'm sure many of you are aware, Vatividya released a video where he argued that the Cleric Beast, being that he is guarding the Great Bridge, that the Cleric Beast is Ludwig. I'm not entirely convinced by that. I'm curious to hear what each of you think out there. For me, whether or not this theory is true or even plausible really depends on three words: as it was. I can't seem to decide whether or not as it was is supposed to mean the same thing as it were, which to me would seem to indicate that there is a connection between the first sentence and the second one in that last paragraph. It could also mean as an aside, perhaps. I can't really puzzle out what those 3 words are supposed to mean. So again, I'm really interested to hear what each of you think. But it's still, nevertheless, it does seem strange that Ludwig would have been mentioned in this item description if, in fact, the Cleric Beast wasn't him. I'm rather partial to Redgrave's theory as presented in the Paleblood Hunt, that we do in fact find Ludwig in the Chalice dungeons. I was going to make an argument, perhaps, that this guy here could perhaps be Ludwig. And then I looked at the outfit that this person was wearing, and it's, I believe, the sweaty clothes or something like that. So clearly not Ludwig. What I was going to say was that perhaps this person came back with the badge to find his way back into the Cathedral Ward, and then was slaughtered unceremoniously by the Cleric Beast. This door here, there is no interaction option when we approach this door. I'm going to link in the video description below a post by Illusory Wall where he investigates this door and finds out that it is in fact the door in that room with all of in the Cathedral Ward with all of the incense burners and the single solitary chest with a blood gem in it. I thought while we're here, might as well do a little bit of sightseeing, because you can see a lot of really interesting landmarks from this perspective. That's Yosefka's clinic right over there. So you can see that's the ladder that we climbed to get to the central Yharnam lamp. And that right there is Gilbert's house, and what the guide calls Gilbert's Gate. And you'll recall that Gilbert was the one who directed us to this location. So we're going to go have a word with him and ask him why the heck we can't get through the gate.
Yes, I see. But the Great Bridge is the only way to the Cathedral Ward. And during the hunt, the bridge is closed. You could try the aqueduct. There's a rather, how shall I put it, colourful area south of the Great Bridge. From there, an aqueduct leads to the Cathedral Ward. Not a place you'd normally want to visit, but I don't imagine you have much of a choice, do you? An aqueduct leads from the town south of the main bridge to the Cathedral Ward. Not a place you'd normally choose to visit, but not much of it.
Well, thanks, Gilbert. I guess we'll go the long way around then. You can hear Gilbert hacking away in the background there. He does not sound like he's doing very well. Merg Zed writes that his only complaint is that I need to be less shy and nervous in my commentary and to be more focused on the discussion at hand. And this is an entirely fair comment and a totally reasonable critique to have of my commentary style. But I would add that it's not really my commentary style, this is just kind of who I am as a person. So to a certain extent, what you see, or what you hear, I guess, is what you get with me. And that is, I open up a number of avenues of discussion before closing previous ones. I sometimes trail off and forget what it was I was talking about. And I apologize sincerely if that's something that bothers you. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but if that's something that really grinds your gears that much, then it's possible that this isn't the playthrough for you. And this is something that really left me feeling uneasy in the aftermath of the whole Vati video controversy, was that I gained a lot of subscribers from people who had seen one 26-minute video that I spent an entire week working essentially non-stop on making, a video that was heavily scripted and heavily edited, and I quite simply just don't have the time to do those types of videos with any sort of regularity. In the process of making that video, I really neglected my personal and professional responsibilities, and it's not something that I can do on a regular basis. So while I have taken some measures to mitigate this perfectly reasonable and valid criticism of my commentary, to a certain extent, it's likely not going to change. So again, please don't take this the wrong way, but this particular series might not be for you if that's something that bothers you so much. So, Mergzed and the Midnight Carnival, thank you very much for your perfectly reasonable and valid and constructive criticisms. I will do my best to address them within reason, because I quite simply cannot devote that much additional time to making these videos, because they're already taking up probably too much time, way more time than I actually do in fact have to spare in my life. So I recorded this gameplay a couple of nights ago when I was much too tired, and I really should have been in bed, and unfortunately it really shows through in my gameplay. It's really rather poor, so I apologize sincerely for that. It's not absolutely terrible in this episode, but in the next episode in particular, when I tried fighting the Blood-Starved Beast, it's really not very good. So again, I apologize if poor gameplay offends you, but this is not really a playthrough about being awesome at the game. This is a playthrough about all of us having a discussion about the lore, and this just merely kind of being what I thought would be a very interesting format and medium for that discussion. I did receive a comment from someone asking whether this was going to be a 100% playthrough. No, it is not going to be a 100% playthrough, but it is going to be an all bosses playthrough. So yeah, so it won't be a 100% playthrough where I go and I do everything and get every item and explore every nook and cranny of the game, but it will be a all bosses playthrough. Or at least all lore significant bosses. So that is to say, all of the bosses in the main game and some of the bosses in the Chalice dungeons.
Beasts all over the shop. You'll be one of them, sooner or later. What's that smell? The sweet blood. Oh, it sings to me. It's enough to make a man sick.
So again, not the best boss fight I've ever had. A really poor one, in fact, but not nearly as bad as my fight against the Blood-Starved Beast, which you'll see in the next episode. And I thought we'd take a minute to survey some of the carnage here. And it's not entirely clear whether these are all Gascoigne's victims, but they would seem very much to be. So that's number 1. Number 2 right by the lamp there. This is number 3. I thought I would, in this case, search every nook and cranny to try and see if we could find extra bodies, but... There's number 4, although that one is in a really advanced state of decomposition, so I'm not entirely sure. Number 5. I'm not entirely sure if that one is actually a victim of Gascoigne's. And there's another one in a really advanced state of composition. So we'll say that's 4 bodies on this level here. But the one I really want to talk about is the 5th body. We can see that there's a enormous pool of blood here, leading to the 5th body. So let's have a seat and think about this for a second. My initial thought when finding this body up here on my second playthrough, when I was able to actually figure out who this was that Gascoigne had launched his wife up into the air, had launched Viola up into the air, and that's how she ended up on this roof. But this enormous pool of blood here would seem to indicate otherwise. I'm sure that blood spatter analysis is a real thing, and that it wasn't entirely just made up by the show Dexter. So if there are any blood spatter analysts out there, I'd be very interested in hearing you weighing in on this, but I can't seem to figure out how it is that Viola lost this much blood, if that is in fact her blood. But this seems to be what the developers are trying to imply here, that the struggle started up here and then spilled down onto that roof, where she succumbed to her wounds and died. You can see there's a little bit more blood here, and an item, which will give us a clue as to who this is.
My mum wears a red jeweled brooch. It's so big and beautiful. You won't miss it.
Red jeweled brooch, a woman's bright red brooch engraved with the name Viola. Perhaps the jewel is a gift from a hunter, used to change into a droplet blood gem that fortifies any weapon. With the proper workshop tool, various weapons can be fortified. So this is another question I have. Why did Gascoigne give this brooch to Viola? Because as we can see, it turns into a blood gem that is an invaluable hunter's tool. So it's curious that he wouldn't have used it himself. A blood gem that fortifies weapons and adds various properties. Droplet blood gems are special gems that adapt to various weapons and shapes. Created from a bright red brooch, this blood gem strengthens the effect of rallying. A quintessential hunter skill, rallying symbolizes the battle-worn hunter, who is often the only thing standing after a bloodbath. So recall that Gascoigne also dropped the key that we would need to get the hunter's tool in order to use blood gems. So why would he have given it to his wife instead of using it himself? Because he had access to the tool. Perhaps that's a point against the idea that Gascoigne may himself have once been a pale blood hunter. I can't seem to figure all of that out. So again, I'm very curious to hear what each of you think. But this entire area, this whole boss room, to me is incredibly, incredibly interesting, and really just a fantastic piece of implicit storytelling of the sort that was so terribly missed in Dark Souls 2, but that occasionally was not bad, but still, it could have been much, much better. So I figured at this point we might as well say hello to Yosefka.
You are safe, thank goodness. But I'm afraid nothing will change my mind. I cannot open the door. Please, try to understand my position. I pray for your safety. You are safe.
I can't recall exactly how many times
But please,
I had to use Yosefka's blood vial and then zone out, zone back in, get another one, use that, zone out, zone back in. I can't recall how many times I had to do it, but it was a fair number of times. So I will link to Epic Game Bros playthrough in the description, from which I learned that you could actually do this and get this additional dialogue from Yosefka.
You are safe, thank goodness. But I'm afraid nothing. I'll do what I. Perhaps this night is. Someone of your caliber won't fail us. I am certain. And once the night of the hunt ends, we can speak face to face. Then I can finally see what you look like. I shouldn't be thinking this. But I am rather looking forward to it. So please, be careful out there.
Looks like we have a date.
I'm sorry. I have nothing. I will pray for your. May light shine upon this night and your fortunes.
Blood vial acquired from Yosefka's clinic. This refined blood, highly invigorating, restores a larger amount of HP. The product of a slow and careful refinement process, this rare blood vial appears to be a clinic original. So a slow and careful refinement process? Could that perhaps be referring to menstruation? I don't know, but the term clinic original to me seems too silly to indicate anything else, but that could just be me. So I thought I would point out, again, something I'm sure everyone knows, but I thought I would point it out anyway, that whenever you get your hands on a new badge, the messengers will be showing off their new wares, so the new things that you can buy. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out what that one messenger is holding, what this blue bottle is, because it looks almost like a blue elixir, but you can't buy the blue elixir from them, I believe, until you get the Cosmic Hunter badge, which you get from the Upper Cathedral Ward. The other messenger is holding a Molotov cocktail. And so here I went and I was looking through trying to figure out which one it was. The only one I thought it could be is the hand lantern. Small portable lantern, this hunting accessory provides light while leaving both hands free to hold weapons. The torch, however, provides a stronger source of light. We also picked up the Hunter Chief emblem, which reads, a cloth emblem that belonged to the captain of the church hunters long ago. Opens the main gate that leads to the round plaza of the great cathedral. The main gate is shut tight on nights of the hunt, and could only be opened from the other side, with this emblem. In other words, the captain's return and this emblem determined the end of the hunt. See, this item strikes me much more as the type of item that Ludwig would have carried. I don't believe he's described anywhere as the captain of the hunt or anything like that. It seems that this emblem, this badge, carries much more significance than merely the sword hunter badge. Could be wrong about that, and I'm interested to hear what each of you think about that. Because it's a very, very powerful symbol to have, that you have the power to end the Knights of the Hunt. Threaded cane, one of the trick weapons of the workshop commonly used by hunters on their duties. Sufficiently deadly as a rigid bladed cane, but also serves as a whip when its blade is split into many. Concealing the weapon inside the cane and flogging the beast with the whip is partly an act of ceremony, an attempt to demonstrate to oneself that the bloodlust of the hunt will never encroach upon the soul. Kirkhammer, a trick weapon typically used by healing church hunters. On the one side, an easily handled silver sword, on the other, a giant obtuse stone weapon characterized by a blunt strike and extreme force of impact. The church takes a heavy-handed, merciless stance towards the plague of beasts, an irony not lost upon the wielders of this most symbolic weapon. So again, just extreme cruelty perpetrated by the church and its hunters against the beasts. Hunter Blunderbuss, a blunderbuss created at the workshop for the hunter's line of work. Hunter firearms are specially crafted to employ quicksilver bullets, fused with the wielder's own blood, boosting damage against beasts. The impact of this highly effective weapon counters beasts' swift movement, and its widespread is nigh on guaranteed to hit the mark. Repeating pistol typically used by healing church hunters. Crafted with mostly metal parts and exhibiting a complex design, the repeating pistol fires 2 shots at once, making it a ravenous consumer of quicksilver bullets. Should be used sparingly compared to its workshop counterpart as the trump card in one's arsenal. So lots of very interesting stuff there. Nothing we're going to get into in great depth at this moment, but we have some lore on Gascoigne as well. Gascoigne's cap, hunter attire worn by Father Gascoigne, similar to hunter garb created at the workshop, only these are tainted by a pungent beastly stench that eats away at Gascoigne. Father is a title used for clerics in a foreign land, and there is no such rank in the healing church. The dingy scarf is a holy shawl and a symbol of the healing church from which Gascoigne would eventually part ways. So again, there doesn't seem to be any other indication that Gascoigne was at one point a Paleblood hunter. So, to me, raising the question again, how in the world did he get a small resonant bell? Or is that one area where they just said, screw it, gameplay doesn't have to actually connect with the lore, or vice versa? Because it's entirely possible that that's the case. As I've argued in previous playthroughs, you can in many cases get very close to having those two things connect, but you can never ever have a one-to-one connection. And I thought we would say hello to Gehrman, but it seems as though we've caught him fast asleep. He appears to be sleeping soundly and peacefully, but inside that mind of his, Gehrman seems to be anything but peaceful. He's trapped and he's depressed and he just wants to get out, but at the same time he seems to have this empathy to him, this kindness that he doesn't want anyone else to go through the same thing that he's currently going through. Although there are alternative ways of looking at that, and that's going to tie back into the meta-narrative I discussed in the previous episode, but that's a really long topic, and not one that we're going to discuss in this particular episode, but we will get to it eventually. was trying to figure out here what the heck this room was once used for. Because you have these sandbags here, and you have what looks to be some sort of structure, some sort of wooden structure in place. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out what the heck this room was supposed to be. If there is a sewage pipe there, seemingly, so perhaps a sewer of sorts? I don't know. But strange that a sewer would be connected to a room as fancy looking as this one. With lots and lots of books, and these things which so fascinated me when I first came across them, because they seem to be very early models of the solar system. But yeah, you can see that it looks a great deal like one of the early models of the solar system, and you can see that the scale is pretty wonky, because if it were actually to scale, then the planets, based on the size of the sun there in the middle, the planets would be essentially dots, tiny dots that you wouldn't even be able to see. I hate the camera in this game so much. I was trying very hard to get a good shot of it. And when we open this chest, we're going to pick up the Blood Gem Workshop Tool. The description for which reads, a misplaced workshop tool from the Hunter's Dream. The hunter who retrieves this can fortify weapons by kneading blood gems into them. Blood gems add properties to weapons when used to fortify them, as blood defines an organism. And so if you had any doubt as to the reality of the Hunter's Dream, this item description should, and the placement of this item should dispel those doubts, because it's an item that was misplaced from the Hunter's Dream, and here we find it in what is ostensibly the real world. So there doesn't seem in practice to be any distinction between what is real and what is not. And so we find ourselves in the Cathedral Ward. And I realized after the fact that that was kind of rude breaking those incense pots there. But I was trying to get a good look at the Chapel Dweller, who I referred to using feminine gender pronouns in my blind playthrough. But according to the guide, the Chapel Dweller is actually male. I believe evidenced by the fact that in various different regions, the Chapel Dweller is voiced by male voice actors.
Oh, you must be a hunter. Very sorry. The incense must have masked your scent. Good, good. I've been waiting for one of your ilk. These hunts have everyone all locked up inside, waiting for it to end. It always does. Always has, you know, since forever. But it won't end nicely. Not this time. Even some folks hiding inside are going bad. The screams of women folk, the stench of blood, the snarls of beasts, none of them's too uncommon now. Yarnum's done for, I tell ya. But if you spot anyone with their wits about them, tell them about this here Erden Chapel. They'll be safe here. The incense wards off the beasts. Spread the word. Tell them to come on over, if you wouldn't mind. I know I shouldn't be asking you, but if you happen to listen...
One of my favorite NPCs in the game, and we'll be talking a fair bit more about him later. So I usually cut bits like this out, where I warp to the Hunter's Dream and then warp to another area, but I figured I would leave this one in because this is something that happens rarely to me and seems to happen more often to other players, but we see here that the doll is praying at a gravestone. And Koipop wrote that he took the doll's dialogue on countless hunters visiting the dream, similar to how he took Malin's comments on his regular customers in Dark Souls 2. They're references to other players. But as someone else remarked in a comment on the previous episode, and as we'll learn later on, it seems like she's praying to someone very specific here. I will be addressing that comment later on in the episode, but just something very, very interesting to note. And I love how when you do certain gestures to her, the way she turns her head. But yes, we'll be returning to the subject of that gravestone later on in this episode and in future episodes as well.
You needn't concern yourself with me. I'm afraid I'm of little help now. But before I did this, I made no use of it, but perhaps you. What afflicted me was incurable, but this town gave me hope. Their strange blood bought me time. I was most fortunate, unharmed by the plague of beasts. I can even die human. Don't you worry about me.
Okay, if you say so. Well, he's clearly a goner, based on his mention of strange blood. Clearly he's been consuming the old blood, which is tainted. We're just going to drop a couple of strange coins for him here. Early Rip in Peace memorial for Gilbert. And let's check out the Flame Sprayer. A special weapon used by certain members of the Healing Church. Spits searing flames by using blood-imbued quicksilver bullets as a special medium. Not the most efficient weapon by any stretch, but sometimes a sea of flame is just what the doctor ordered. Besides, the beasts of Yharnam can always use a good cleansing. So again, this institutionalized cruelty that the Healing Church seems to have adopted seemingly in the Ludwig era. And it's also worth noting that Gilbert says he never made use of it. So he doesn't seem to have really been much of a hunter at all. And so I did a fair bit of fast forwarding in this episode because I took some really long routes to get to places, and even though I think at this point I know the game fairly well, I still get turned around a little bit in certain spots, especially compared to how well I'm able to navigate Dark Souls 1 and 2. And we're of course coming to check on the lonely old deer to make sure that she's doing alright, and to potentially send her to the Udan Chapel.
Now what is it now? Are much better ways to pass the time. Unless you found me a nice safe place. Well, what do you know? An outsider worth a lick of salt. Well, don't just stand there. Don't you have work to do? Go slit some throats. Get this mess done with. Oh, enough with you. Trot along. Chop, chop.
Koipop writes that it's interesting that there were potentially two Paleblood hunters before you, Jura and Eileen, and two previous eras of hunters, Gehrman's Workshop and the Powder Kegs, and then the Church Workshop hunters. To which I would say, I'm fairly certain that the Powder Kegs weren't necessarily a era of hunters as much as they were a mercenary group, but we'll be talking a lot about the Powder Kegs in the next episode and in subsequent episodes after that as well. And something quickly I wanted to note here, which I failed to mention in the previous episode, is that those incense lanterns outside of most of the houses actually ward off the beasts. I believe that's something that's fairly well known at this point. But you can see here, this house, that incense lantern has been extinguished for some reason or another. So it would seem to have spelled doom for the inhabitants of that house.
Hello, Mr. Hunter. Still can't find my mum.
Notice the only option we have available to us is no, because we used the brooch for a blood gem.
Oh, okay. I can wait. But isn't there something I can do? Maybe Mum and Dad are stuck out there, waiting for me to come and find them. What do you think, Mr. Hunter? Yes, okay. Thank you, Mr. Hunter. I love you almost as much as Mum and Dad. And Granddad.
So she has a granddad. Interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. I love you almost as much as Mum and Dad. And Granddad.
So if you've read The Paleblood Hunt by DMC Redgrave, you should be familiar with his theory about the granddad mentioned by daughter Gascoigne. And I wanted here to at least give her one more taste of her music box before we left her. And it really is a shame that you can't give it back to her. Because, yeah, she's all alone in there and she has no one. I'll see you later, daughter Gascoigne. I'm sorry. I really feel just god-awful lying to her. And so we're back to Yosefka's clinic, checking up on that date opportunity we had. Maybe she wants to go out earlier.
Oh, well, hello. Splendid. Let me ask you a small kindness. You're soon off to hunt, I presume? Then, if you find any survivors, tell them to seek Yosefka's clinic. Upon my Hippocratic oath, if they are yet human, I will look after them. Perhaps even cure them. This sickness, these beasts, they are not to be feared. This time the night is long. I may be trapped here, but I should do something to help. I'll even offer a reward for your cooperation. Tempted? Well, off you go then.
So this has been covered by enough people at this point, so I won't really be saying much about that, but it's such a funny... The voices sound similar enough for sure, but the sentiment behind it is completely different. And so I thought we would check on Gilbert one more time, but...
Don't you worry about me.
But I am worried, Gilbert. And you can see now that we've gone into the Aegon Chapel, the time of day has advanced once again, and the moon is hanging much lower than it was previously. We find that the lights are out inside of the Gascoigne household and there is no response. So maybe she's made her way to the Aegon Chapel? I guess we'll see. Nicole Dubois asked whether I will be doing any chalice dungeons, as she's yet to see them and she's curious about the lore. My initial answer to this question would have been no, but I've since decided, after being convinced by Jason or Neo Loki, of the significance of the chalice dungeons in terms of the lore. So, to answer your question, yes, I will be doing parts of the chalice dungeons on camera, but not all of them. So I will likely just be doing the lore significant bosses of the chalice dungeons on camera, while the rest of the stuff I will kind of do in the background in between episodes. So I hope that's a satisfactory middle ground between me doing the, Chalice Dungeon grind on the one hand, and me missing out on the lore by not doing them on the other. And so once we descend into the aqueduct, we find this giant boar who we killed in the previous episode, and after a butt stab, it drops 2 items. First of which, just some blood vials, and the second, a red messenger ribbon. Red ribbon that messengers are oddly fond of. The thick, pungent red was drawn from the organs of some unfortunate victim. A strange choice indeed, but perhaps for the messengers, wearing this accessory constitutes a form of mourning. I legitimately have no idea what to think about this, and how Daughter Gascoigne found her way here, but yeah, tragic nonetheless, and why she would have gone to the aqueducts is beyond me. Crow left a very interesting comment on the previous episode, which could potentially problematize our conception of Gehrman, and who he is, his history, and I'm not going to address this right now, but I did want to draw attention to it for the time being, so that, once again, when we go to the Abandoned Church Workshop, that this is something we're going to be talking about a great deal. I'm beginning to think that with the amount of stuff we have to talk about in the Abandoned Church Workshop, that we might just spend an entire episode there, but that remains to be seen. But Crow draws attention to the fact that the wording of the item description for the Old Hunter's Bone seems to refer to Gehrman as Old Gehrman. But yeah, that's something that I'm not going to address in full for now, but I would encourage each of you to check out that comment and think about it, because that's something that we're definitely going to be talking about in greater depth going forward, but specifically in the episode where we visit the Abandoned Church Workshop. Rob TCGZ writes that he read Redgrave's essay and he was blown away, and that it was amazing and very insightful. And if there's any of you out there who have not yet read it, I would once again encourage you to go and read it right now. He mentions that he knows that it'll be a while before I get to Murgo's Loft and find occasion to discuss the chest there that has Iosefka's blood vial in it. And he was wondering how it got there, him along with many, many, many others. And he doesn't want to believe that it's there for the sake of simply being there. And my position on this is, I guess, first to disappoint you, I don't have a firm grasp on why it would be there. But perhaps to give you hope, on the other hand, I would point out that it's really not all that useful an item in terms of its gameplay significance. Whereas the Divine Blessing, for example, from Dark Souls 1 and 2, healed you in full. You could carry up to 99 of them at any one time. Iosefka's blood vial, you can only carry one at a time, and it doesn't heal you in full. I believe it increases your stamina regen, or that might just be Ariana's blood vial, but it doesn't seem significant enough from a gameplay perspective to just be there for that reason. I do have a rather speculative reason for it, and that is, if we're to accept that the blood in that vial is in fact menstrual blood, then it could very well be that the School of Mensis has that blood there so that it could be tested to see whether or not Iosefka is a candidate for luring the Great Ones, whether or not she could take the place of Yharnam, the Pthumerian Queen, in luring the Great Ones. So that's my very, very speculative reason for that. But I did want to address the comment in this episode specifically so that everyone else who's watching can actually have a chance to think about that going forward, so that by the time we do get there, we have a better kind of communal understanding, or at least a fuller body of speculation from which we can kind of build a more firm understanding of why or why not it might be there. From my position, as I've stated, I have that speculative position. but also I doubt very much that it would be there for gameplay reasons alone, because I really don't think it's all that useful, a gameplay item. Softwanereza asks whether I can do an arcane build in this series. I apologize, because I, like you, don't really know how to make one myself, or at least don't know how to make one that's particularly effective. And as I understand it, on a more general level, arcane seems to be particularly underpowered in this game, especially relative to, say, intelligence in Dark Souls 1. So I apologize, but I'm in the same boat. I did see that someone linked to a Reddit thread under you, so I hope that whatever it is you're looking for, that thread will contain something that will help you put together a build of that sort. I tend to focus mainly on melee in all the Souls games, so again, I apologize that that's not something I can really help you with. Softwan also asked whether this is a 100% walkthrough. Not really. It may very well turn out to be, but it is a, close to 100% lore analysis, I guess you would say. Maybe 90% lore. In terms of a walkthrough, that is not really what the series is for. I will provide a link in the video description to Epic Name Bros' playthrough of the game, which, if it's not a 100% walkthrough, it's pretty damn close. So if that is what you're looking for, that would definitely be something to check out. And I guess I should apologize for the delay in getting this particular episode out. I am recording the answers to questions today on July 20th, and I believe I recorded the initial post commentary on July 14th or 15th or something to that effect. But I had initially intended on getting everything done before I went on vacation, but unfortunately I wasn't able to do that just because these episodes take so incredibly long to render, so that wasn't something I was able to do. But thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
You there? Hunter! Didn't you see the warning?